That's why it's our job to do what? To share the gospel with them. Because if we don't do it, who's going to do it? But when this life is over and you receive your heavenly reward, you won't worry about that. And I want to prove it to you. Come to Revelation 21. What does God say about eternity? Revelation 21, look at verse 4. And God shall do what? Wipe away all the tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither what? Sorrow, nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are what? Passed away. We would not be happy in heaven if we knew that others had been unjustly kept out. But the fact is that they're not there because they chose what? They chose not to be. However, we can be happy in heaven the same way we can be happy eating while knowing that others are starving. Namely, if we have offered them food, but they refuse to eat it. Listen to me. There's one thing here that I want to stress. We have to do our part as believers. And what is our part? Our part is to take that message of the gospel and give it to the people that we love. And then we leave it there and let it, what does Paul say? One plants, another waters, but who gets the increase? You might not, it may be years. It may be that right then, it may be years and years. But once the message of Christ is put into their mind, once the truth of the cross work of Christ and His resurrection from the dead is put into their mind, they have the capacity at any point in the future to believe that message and be saved. Objection 4. Why did God create people that He knew would go to hell? Some critics of eternal punishment argue that if God knew some creatures would reject Him and eventuate in such a horrible place, He would have never created them. Wouldn't it be better to have never existed than to exist and spend eternity in hell? Well, let's talk about this one as well. First of all, non-existence is not better than existence. Did you hear what I said? That statement is based on the presupposition that it's better to not exist than to exist. Non-existence cannot be said to be a better condition than existence. Since non-existence is nothing, to affirm that nothing can be better than something is a colossal logical mistake. Number one. Number two, that not all people will win in the game of life does not mean that it should not be played. A few illustrations here. How many teams win the Super Bowl? Now, if you know that only one team is going to win, do both teams say, we might lose, we're not going to play? Is that the way it goes? You know that when you get in your car, you could die every time. Every time you get in your car to go to work or wherever it is that you're going, could you die? Every time. But do you go to work? Do you come to church? Do you do all these things? But yet you know there's a what? There's a risk. Right? You know that because it's instinctive and you know that in life. Likewise, God, from God's standpoint, it is better to have loved all people of the world. John 3:16, for God so loved what? The world that He gave His only begotten Son. Right? It is better to have loved all the world and to give Himself as a propitiation for the sin of everybody and have lost, and inevitably, knowingly, He's going to lose some of them, than to have never loved any of them at all. Isn't that better? Listen, I don't care what Calvinistic theology says. God knew all this business about a limited atonement and all this stuff. That stuff is a bunch of theological nonsense. It's a superstructure. And if you knock one of those five, if you pick one of the petals, 5 petals off the tulip, the whole flower dies. Because it's a theological superstructure. Jesus Christ, He is... Come with me to Romans chapter 3. You have to... We don't have time to get into this, but you also have to rightly divide this issue. Because Jesus Christ in the upper room in Matthew 26... He's standing there, and he's breaking the bread at the first communion, if you want to call it that, and he's passing out the elements, and he says, "This cup is the New Testament in my blood, which is shed for what? For many. For the remission of sins." But wait a minute. We just read in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 4, "Who will have all men to be what? Saved and come to the knowledge of the truth." Is there a difference in Matthew between many and in 2 Timothy, all? What's the difference? Well, where are you at in Matthew 26? You're in time past. He came unto His own, and His own what? Received Him not. He came in His earthly ministry to fulfill the covenants and the promises made unto the fathers. And when Israel rejects Him and don't want their king, God sets Him aside and does something new with the Gentiles in the dispensation of grace. And now He's saying what? Who will have all men to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth, to be testified when, in the next verse, in due time. Whereunto I am ordained an apostle and a prophet. Romans chapter 3, verse 22. Notice, even the righteousness of who? God, notice, which is by faith of Jesus Christ, unto the elect. Wait a minute. Unto who? Now, how many is all? So, I don't do this anymore. But if I had a box of cookies up here and I ate all of them, how many are left in the box? So, it's unto who? All, right? Isn't that what it says? It's unto all. Notice, next phrase. And upon all them that what? See, the atonement, in its application, the atonement potentially is unlimited. It's been made for who? All men. But it is only limited to those who choose to what? Believe. You see that? You need not let theology come around and screw you up. Objection 5. Is it right or just to send people to hell when they can't help being sinners? Well, this is what this objection says. The Bible says we are all born sinners, okay? Excuse me. We're children of wrath, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 3. If sinners could avoid sinning, or cannot avoid sinning, then is it fair to send people to hell for sin? Well, people go to hell for two reasons, folks. Number one, they're born with a bent to sin. They're born sinners. Number two, the reason they go is because they choose to what? They choose to sin. So they are born on a road that leads to hell. But those who remain on this road also fail to heed the warning signs and turn from the destruction that is inevitable and be what? Saved. While human beings sin because they are sinners by nature, nonetheless, their sin nature does not force them to sin. They choose to sin because of their what? Their sin nature. Come with me to Hebrews chapter 11. Whoops. Come with me to Hebrews chapter 11. Listen, my kids, I'll tell you what. I stopped asking them, why'd you do that? I stopped asking them, why'd you do that? Because I already know why they did it. They did it because they're kin to their daddy. Right? And I did it because I was kin to my daddy and his daddy and his daddy and so on, all the way back to who? Adam. Romans chapter 5. For as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, so death passed upon all men, for that all have what? Why didn't Jesus Christ have a sin nature? I'll give you a big hint. He didn't have a human father. He didn't have a human father. Go read Genesis chapter 5 when it says that Adam had children after his likeness in his image.